I'm Asavari Deshpande, a student of Year 3 of BDES program in Humanizing Technology. On behalf of NMIMS School of Design, I extend a warm welcome to parents, faculty, and students. I formally welcome the speaker for today, Mr. Rajeev Chaudhary. As a part of the rollout of the new academic year, NMIMS School of Design conducts a week-long orientation program called DFutura, the future of design. This time, the program is conducted online for the 5th batch of BDES. DFutura stands for the futuristic view of design, showcasing its transitory, collaborative, and technology-driven nature. The program comprises of speaker sessions, workshops that hope to inspire the students as well as open a window for their 4-year journey at the school. We continue with the Get Inspired series, a part of DFutura orientation program, inspiring talks to broaden our horizons. Since this is a virtual event, we request you to mute your microphones and switch off your videos. However, questions are most welcome. Please type your questions in the chat section. We'll be addressing them at the end. The more you question, the more you explore. Without much ado, let me introduce you to Mr. Rajeev Chaudhary. Mr. Rajeev Chaudhary is the founder and managing director of 2 companies, Pathshala Learning Solutions Private Limited and the Gamification Company. And we are proud to have him as the second speaker, igniting young minds with his talk on the role of neuroscience of play in design. Mr. Rajib has over 28 years of operational and consulting experience spanning numerous industries. Specifically on the gamification front, he led the conceptualization, development, and implementation of gamification strategies and platforms with organizations spreading across retail, banking, construction, etc., with significant tangible outcomes. Mr. Rajib and his team have launched 2 award-winning platforms, both of which being innovative gamified ecosystems. Today, Mr. Rajeev Chaudhary will be talking about the role of neuroscience of play in design. Look forward to an engaging session. Sir, the virtual stage is yours.
Right. Good evening, Sarvari. Thank you very much for the introduction. And good evening, students and parents, I believe also have joined in. So very, very happy to be here. Very, very happy to be a part of this entire induction program. And also very happy to talk about a topic one, which is very close to my heart, which is the entire concept of gamification. And also talk about how gamification actually plays a very important role, or the entire concept of neuroscience plays a very important role in design thinking by itself. Right. Now, I know I've got about 2 hours actually to talk about it, but I'm a gamification evangelist. I can talk to you about gamification and neuroscience of play for the rest of the evening and till the cows come home, but that's not what I intend to do. What I plan on doing is I've kept a few slides. I'm going to talk about the concept. I'm going to talk about how actually the entire concept of neuroscience of play meshes itself, as well as it's extremely important when we talk about design thinking. But those are limited. What I'm actually also looking forward to is to make it as interactive as possible. I would welcome it if you're actually willing to debate, if you're willing to question, if you have any doubts that you'd like to bring up. And then that way, I think it'll be very interesting. It will be exploratory. The reason I also wanted to be exploratory is because I personally believe that I'm going to walk away with a lot of learning from all of you, especially more so because I'm a big fan of this generation. I believe y'all are game changers. This generation is a generation of completely different thinkers. More so for, I have a very, very high regard for the NIM School of Design, and as well as the students who come from there. Last year, we had a few interns who were actually working with us. And believe you me, the work that they've done, a lot of that work has actually got converted into actual products that we have rolled out. In fact, also they've worked directly on client projects. And they've done absolutely brilliant work. So which has just gone ahead and made me a bigger fan of the Institute. And hence, I'm actually looking forward to a very, very interactive session. Right. With that said, I'll share my slides and please feel free to stop me if you think you're not able to hear something, or if you have a question that you really want to ask immediately, just feel free. All right. And do confirm to me once you're able to see my screen, please.
Yes, sir. Able to see your screen.
Able to see?
Yep.
Right. So, as the name says, I'll start off with a bit of an introduction to begin with. As the name says, we are the gamification company, and our motto in life is to make everyday fun. And when I say make everyday fun, and we're very, very interestingly, we're very serious about it. Whether we talk about business process transformation, or we talk about creating products, or we're talking about employee engagement or customer engagement, the entire objective is how do you make that every day, every single moment that you're interacting, interesting, fun, and engaged, right? Because with greater engagement is, we believe is that when you're having fun, when you're in a state of play, it's only at that point of time when you're the most engaged, and you're the most productive only when you're the most engaged, right? For us, Yukai Chow is a big inspiration, and more so because he's the one who actually keeps talking about how important play is, gamification is, and how it's actually a human-focused design. And that's important for us because to give you a very brief background about the gamification company and how we were born. This was an offshoot that we set up in 2019, just before the COVID year, the year previous to that. And it came on the back of a client request, but we were already instructional designers. We were already behavioral scientists in the space that we were working in, which was Pathshala. And we were OD specialists, which is organization development. And all of us were behavioral scientists, instructional designer, OD specialists, trainers, etc., and working extensively in that area. And on the back of a client request, when a client called us up and said, "Hey, we want to do something in the space of gamification," and called us in and told us that it looks something very similar to the all the behavioral sciences that you keep talking about. And honestly, we really had no clue about it at that point of time. And we got into it, and we thought it's a typical product, and that's also the time that we were transitioning into a product kind of a space, and we had created a few products, and we took a product to them, and then we realized that, hey, this is not what they're talking about at all. Gamification is a completely different ball game altogether. The entire concept of neuroscience of play was different. And when we started getting deeper and deeper into it, we realized that it's an extension of what we do. In fact, it amplifies what we do in the behavioral sciences, and it's become a core passion area for us. So our entire organization's identity is around the entire space of neuroscience of play and around gamification, right? So how are we positioned in the market? We actually are, our identity is that we are a neuroscience of play and technology backed ideas and products company. And that is exactly what we are. Today we have, in a very short period of time, despite the fact that we've gone through terrible COVID years, we have created a niche for ourselves in this part of the world, where actually pretty good niche for ourselves, where we actually have clients and people who are reaching out to us when they think about gamification. They think about gamifying their business processes. They think about gamifying their products, etc. They're reaching out to us for ideas. There are clients who are reaching out to us to create products for them, which are gamified products by itself. But at the same time, we also have our own products and platforms that we have launched, a couple of them very successful, and implemented across South Asia and also across India. Very soon, we're going global with one of our platforms, which is in the space of employee engagement and organization performance enhancement. Now, these are all backed by neuroscience of play. These are all backed by principles of gamification. But we don't believe that gamification is completely limited only to a technology product per se. For us, gamification is a way of life. It's a science. So we also create lovely physical games. Like one of the games that we have created is a game called Setu, which is actually a board game. And what we are doing, it's a part of our series that we are launching over the next few years. We're taking all the ancient Indian games and we're converting them. We're bringing in modern management principles and philosophies, and we're converting them into modern games, keeping the entire ethos of those ancient games absolutely alive and releasing them in the market with real tangible outcomes. Our playground is very interesting. We work in the space of amplification of organization and individual outcomes. So we focus extensively on how an organization outcome can be enhanced and also individual performance can be enhanced. We work in the space of amplification of core business processes. We work in the space of sustained engagement and amplification of learning outcomes. And also we are now working extensively in the space of nation building and behavioral transformation at a societal level. Now, this is very interesting because all of the work that we are doing with such real tangible outcomes, are seeped, are absolutely seeped in the concept of design thinking. What we have done is we've taken the concept of design thinking and we've very nicely blended in the entire neuroscience of play and gamification principles. And that's how we use as a foundation to build every single solution that we actually release either on our own in the market, or we build it for our clients, right? And that's the experience that I'm going to talk to you about, because there's no textbook on it currently. And even if there are some books, papers written on it, they all concentrate on how neuroscience of play or gamification can be used in designing learning programs. But we've gone way beyond that. We don't just design learning programs. We actually work on core business processes for organizations, amplification of core business processes. We work on societal transformation. So what I'm going to share with you essentially is a lot to do with the experience that I've had in the last few years working in this space, and also the experience that I bring onto the table for so many years on the area of behavioral sciences and organization development, and give you some examples of the work that we're doing, and also back it up with some examples of what we've seen in the market. And then we can open it up into a discussion, and I'll be happy to answer some questions if you have. Right, this is our playground. Our playground essentially talks about gamification COE, where we do a lot of strategy consulting work. We do a lot of storyboarding and design work. We do a lot of bespoke learning game creation. We're starting to work with an American firm where what they're looking at assessing student behavior patterns, their cognitive skills, etc. And we're doing the entire storyboarding, consulting, the entire design, end-to-end design for them. There are clients who've reached out to us saying that, hey, we've got a concept in mind and we'd like to create a gamified product. So that goes under gamification COE, and we do that for them. We're coming out with a series called the Play to Learn series, which is very, very interesting. This is typically an app in which you play a whole lot of different micro games based on storyboards. And as you're playing the game, what's happening at the back end is there is a psychometric assessments, and there are various psychometric assessments that are running. We're going to release this very soon. We're releasing this in September in a big bang launch. We have a soft launch coming in August, and I'd like to welcome any of you who would like to be a part of our UAT team testing out the game when we do this in August. And a whole lot of skills like behavioral skills like career drivers, influencing skills, negotiation skills, etc., are all going to come under the Play to Learn series. Then we build gamified platform. Corobus is an award-winning platform for us. It's the platform that's now been implemented across South Asia. We've got it across India in organizations like Standard Chartered. We've got Johnson Controls, ICICI Bank, etc. We have another very interesting product that we are coming up, which is an absolute need of the hour, given the fact that post-COVID, there's a lot of work from home, there's a lot of distributed architecture in the workforce, and people are joining in different remote locations. So we are creating a completely gamified employee onboarding platform called Acclimate. We'll launch this in the next few months. We're partnering with an existing client on that one. We have a gamified campus to career ecosystem that we are POCing right now. We'll launch this in about a year's time, which completely democratizes and the entire campus to career ecosystem in the country, makes remote locations, remote colleges available to organizations and vice versa. More importantly, allows students sitting in the remote part of the country who possibly do not have access to very sophisticated learning mediums to actually start improving their cognitive skills, their application skills, their English skills, etc. And all of that in a gamified manner. Right. And then we're working with, we are actually in the process of designing right now. It's in the design stage, a very, very beautiful ecosystem called the Green Squad. It's a viral game. And it's actually based on the entire sustainable environment ecosystem. And it's going to be a sustainable environment ecosystem, which is a gamified sustainable environment ecosystem, which will help you understand, learn, and as well as change behaviors and adopt behaviors which are more in line with maintaining a sustainable environment. We're going to work with the United Nations on this one. We are backing it up with a sustainable environment marketplace, which will ensure that if you have a product which is built, which is responsibly built or produced, or a product which is more in line with the sustainable environment goals, that SDG goals that United Nations has, you'll be able to sell the products on that marketplace as well as buy. So then that entire thing is going to be a gamified experience, right? Our winning aspiration, we want to be the go-to organization that builds high-impact products and solutions that helps businesses, institutions, and governments solve real problems. And the entire idea is we will use that using human-focused design, neuroscience of play, and gamification principles absolutely at our foundation level. We intend to be the leading engine of learning and behavioral change-led transformation. And we want to be a global leader in innovative ideas and products with gamification at its core. We missed this year, but we definitely intend to be in your campus next year for hiring, because I think the strength that your institution brings onto the table is ideation and extremely innovative thinkers, and that's what we are looking for. Right. That then brings me to the topic of the entire role of neuroscience of play in design. Now, it sounds interesting. It sounds, in some ways, it sounds a little complicated itself. It talks about neuroscience and where does it fit into the entire design space. And that is exactly the point of discussion today for us. Right. So when we talk about the entire concept of neuroscience of play in design, so we are talking about two clear aspects which are otherwise thought very differently. You have design thinking. You have the entire design thinking process, right, from empathize to ideate to design to develop to prototype and to implement, etc. And then you have the entire neuroscience of play, which talks about the behavioral sciences, which can be used to transform behaviors. But what is very, very interesting is if you look at both of them combined. Let's talk about design thinking, for example. So let's say design thinking. Design thinking is, what is design thinking? Design thinking, and I'm sure you guys are all aware of it. For students who are coming in now, you've also obviously gone through some amount of information, education on design thinking. But design thinking essentially is a human-centered iterative process. The entire idea is to solve wicked problems which don't have a simple right answer. I mean, if there's a problem which has a right answer, sure, not a problem. You know how to fix it. But every time you come across with a problem which does not have a straightforward, very simple response, that's where design thinking needs to come into play. The entire design thinking philosophy process needs to come into play to come to multiple solutions from which you're actually going to make a choice, right? So that's design thinking for you. But what is gamification, or what is neuroscience of play, right? And for us to understand the entire concept of gamification and neuroscience of play, it's very, very important first to understand the difference between gaming and gamification. There's a huge difference, and this is a very common question that keeps coming to me from all quarters, really. Actually, whether it's the corporate side or institutions or students or individuals, I mean, it's a common question. Oh, gamification, great, great. I love gaming. I said, yeah, but that's gamification is different. I said, yeah, of course. In fact, I remember one conversation that I had with a very, very senior gentleman in one of the corporate organizations that I was interacting with. And I said, I'm a gamification evangelist and we create a whole lot of gamified solutions. And we're in the space of gamification. He says, yes, perfect. And I absolutely love gaming. You send me your product. I love playing games and I've played the games right till the last level. And at that point of time, I also realized that there is a certain level of education that is required for people to understand that gamification and gaming are two different aspects altogether. Right? Let's talk about gaming. What do we understand by gaming? I mean, the minute you think about the word gaming, you actually have this picture in your mind of people playing day and night. There's a game that's going on. There's PUBG or any other such games, completely obsessed. There's extremely wide-eyed people, parents trying to drag their children out of the room because they're busy in the middle of a game. You hate leaving this game and going out anywhere, etc., etc. And by the way, all of that is true, and all of that happens. Given the fact that I've got a young son, and I can vouch for it, that yeah, it does happen. When he's gaming, right? But let's understand where gaming comes from. Gaming actually comes from the word gambling, which started way back with the entire, from the Las Vegas per se. That's where it takes it from. Gaming is very heavily seeped in the electronic medium. A lot of that happens in the electronic medium, and progressively it's becoming highly immersive and interactive with a lot of AR, VR, and mixed reality solutions. Gaming is an industry by itself. It's highly immersive, highly interactive, but the primary objective of gaming is fun. That is what it aims to deliver at the end of the day. Not for the organizations who are selling it, that's obviously very different, but to the end user who's actually playing the game, the only thing gaming is delivering to the end user is fun. That's its only objective, is to deliver fun to that person, right? Now, that's where gamification is very, very different. Gamification actually uses the entire concept of neuroscience of play. It takes game mechanics. It borrows elements of game from gaming, like game mechanics and immersive visualization techniques, but it takes it into the non-game context, and the objective is to solve real-world problems. The objective is to build engagement, and the objective is to bring about behavioral transformation. So while gaming's primary objective is fun, gamification is an actual science which works on very, very deep rooted embedded behavioral sciences. It borrows from the game mechanics and it ensures that it's actually solving certain real world problems. It's building engagement in people, right? It's transforming behaviors at macro as well as micro level. So essentially, if you look at gamification and neuroscience of play and neuroscience of play, and you look at design thinking, the objective is more or less common. Both design thinking and neuroscience of play are looking at solving real problems. Both of them are human-centric design. So then the question remains is that can we not look at design thinking and neuroscience of play, or neuroscience of play and design thinking, as a composite approach by itself? Is that not possible? Is that not something that we could actually consider? And that's where all the new age thinkers, new age designers like you will come into play, because tomorrow you're the one who's actually going to design products, solutions, services, processes for organizations, governments, for the society as a whole, per se, right? And coming in there, and if you really want to understand as to how do you get both of them to work together, I'm going to go a little deeper into behavioral sciences per se. And this is a very important aspect. It'll be good. I've tried to make it a little fun and interesting, but it'll be good for you to understand, because a lot of the work that you will actually start doing, and that's the baseline that you need to have in place, so that you're starting to ask the right questions and not just following a process for the sake of following a process, right? So let's do this. I'm going to do this like a crossword puzzle. So I'm going to give a cryptic clue. Let's see who comes up with an answer. And Asabri, I'm going to request for your help, because I can't really see the comment box here. Here's the clue. Let's see who comes up with the right word for it. So the clue is multiple solutions that we ultimately seek. 8 letters. Anybody? Or you can actually come off mute and give me the answer. And guys, uh, there are no points which are going to get deducted for giving me a wrong answer. Make it as much fun as you can. Let's hear some answers. 8 letters, multiple solutions that we ultimately seek. Would you like another hint?
I guess that would be great, sir.
Okay, it's a word that starts with O, ends with S. All right, let me raise the stake. 100 bucks. When I say 100 bucks, I'm talking about 100 rupees. 100 rupees for the person who's able to give me the right answer now. Word that
We
starts with
have,
O, ends with S.
yes, sir, we have two answers. Medini says opinions and Ameya says outcomes.
All right, then I think you must record Amaya as the person. The right word happens to be outcomes. So we've got Amaya, who we've actually got. So remind me, whenever I come to college, I need to give him 100 bucks. All right, now we're coming to the second one. All right, second one. Now, anybody who's able to give me all the 3 correct answers, I will gift you that one game that we've built called Setu. Things that we do to finally arrive at the outcomes. $100 stands, and Amaya, you might want to go for it. You give
Is
all three right answers. You get, apart
is
from
it?
the $100, you also get a gift.
Well, we have got two answers. Parsha says iterate and Isha also says iterate.
No, another guess.
Is it process?
No,
Okay.
it's what we do. Of course, iterate is also something that we do, but something that comes before iterate.
Okay. Sakshi says, is it observe? And Neha answers, is it experiment?
Okay, when you're observing and when you're experimenting or you're iterating, what is it that you're doing? You're performing
Medini
something.
says, Medini answers, is it analyze?
No. When you're doing all of these things, you're doing something. All of these answers are right. These are things that you actually do. But when you're doing all of these things, you're answering something. What is that? You're basically doing something. All of the answers are right. And let's see.
Arnab says,
Testing,
testing. Yes, testing.
insight.
Insight.
No. Come on, guys. It's actually a cryptic crossword. So it will be linked to one of the alphabets here. Okay, I'll give you a hint. It's linked to the alphabet C, but it doesn't start with C.
Yugna answers creating and Nachiket answers solving.
Okay, not yet. It's not so difficult. It's a very simple answer. It's all of these things when you're doing, whether you're creating, you're ideating, you're analyzing, you combine all of them. What is it that you're doing?
Well, Mihika says solution and Aditya sir says crafting. Harshika says critic.
Okay, go deeper than that. It's just one layer. All of these put together would be what?
Tanya
All
says
right.
discuss. Ayushi
Okay.
says reflect.
All right, let me give you a hint. The first alphabet happens to be A. The first alphabet is A, and everything that everybody has answered, if you put all of them together, what would that amount to?
Aditya sir says assimilating.
नहीं 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 ये तो बहुत भारी भयंकर वर्ड हो गया.
Rihan says is it achieve?
No, simple. Go simple.
Isha answers actions.
Super. Who's this?
Isha.
All right, Isha. So I owe you $100, and the right answer to this is actions. If there are certain outcomes that we seek, we need to perform certain actions. Right now, whatever outcome that we seek, the outcome is, and in the entire design thinking process, if you think about right from the first step of empathizing and you go to the last step of prototyping, you're basically seeking a certain outcome. You're aiming at a certain goal. You want to arrive at a certain goal. And if you want to arrive at that certain goal, you need to perform a series of actions, right? But what behavioral sciences does is, in order to make those, ensure that you actually arrive at 100% achievement of those particular outcomes. Now, if you have to arrive at 100% achievement of those particular outcomes, you need to perform certain actions. And in order to support those actions comes another word. Now, let's see. What finally determines whether we put in 100% into actions? This should be easy. Asabri, I'm going to depend on you to remember who I need to pay the $100.
Yes, sir.
For all I know, suddenly this might cost me a lot of money.
Well, Sakshi says results. Pranjal also says results.
Okay, no. Results are outcomes. What finally determines whether we put our 100% into the actions?
Shrikar says efforts. Shreya ma'am says motivation. Sparsha says
Okay, let's
products.
build on motivation. Products are
Tanush,
outcomes, efforts are something that you're doing, which is a set of your actions. You have motivation, let's build on motivation.
Ayushi says passion. Tanushree says returns. Sharvari
Okay,
says creation.
okay, go ahead,
Shreya ma'am says desires or needs.
go ahead,
Isha says success.
right, go ahead. Success is an outcome.
Well, Medini answers motives.
Motives. So let's build on motives and motivation and think of it differently.
All right.
Want a clue? Apart from the fact that obviously it is linked to one of the alphabets on the screen, it's a word that starts with B. B for Bombay.
Okay. Tanushri answers beliefs.
Excellent. So that's Tanushri. So now I've got three
Great.
people that I need to. And the answer is beliefs. You're right. Absolutely. So the what neuroscience says and the value creation process or the behavior the entire behavioral sciences aspect of it, it says that if there is a certain outcome that you're seeking and you're looking for a certain outcome, you obviously need to perform a series of actions. However, what's the real differentiator is the belief that sits behind either the actions or the outcome. So if I don't have 100% belief towards either the outcome or towards the action that I need to perform, I will never put my 100%. And if I don't put my 100%, my outcome gets compromised. Now, if you think about it from a design parlance, there is, when we are doing design thinking, when we are designing a new product, when we are actually trying to bring about a great solution, there is an outcome that that we are seeking. And in order to achieve that outcome, we have a process that we follow, whether we call it the design thinking process or we call it the Six Sigma process or whichever process that you want to think about, or you call it the lean process, right? Whichever process you tend to follow. But end of the day, there is that human factor of belief. If the belief is compromised, your outcome will always get compromised. And that is where we come in with the question that what is that wicked problem that we need solving? For example, that's the outcome, right? So it's very simple. When you're thinking design, and it's very, very simple. Even if you're thinking of an innovative solution, that wicked problem that needs solving must necessarily either solve a pain or create a gain. And that's the first question that you need to answer, right? What is the outcome of this whatever process that I'm doing? Is it solving a pain or is it creating a gain? Because if it is not solving a pain or creating a gain, then it's innovation for the sake of innovation, which is quite pointless, right? It has to necessarily solve a pain or create a gain. And then we talk about what do I need to do? Let's say I've got that sorted and I want to solve a pain or I want to create a gain. And that's where my entire design thinking principles are going to come in. And that's where design thinking is coming in terms of the actions. I identify an opportunity, I go through the research, I look at insights, I look at I look at the hindsight, insight. I also look at foresight in terms of ideation, prototypes. I look at the entire user-centered empathetic process to defining the problem, to developing a solution, to testing the prototyping the solution, then implementing it, and then measuring it. I go through the entire cycle. But that's an action that I'm doing. But the question remains, and my action could be absolutely flawless. And I'm sure that I've done a great amount of research. I've absolutely identified that, hey, this is a big problem in the country, or this is a big problem that I need to solve. And I need to solve this problem right. And hence, I've done a research to find out where are the great opportunities that I have, what is it that I need to do, what is it that I need to fix. And I've come out with a great prototype and I've implemented it. But there are so many such products that you can think of which have got implemented, having followed the entire process, come out with absolutely great design, but completely failed. Why? Because the most important question has not been answered. And the most important question here is the belief. Either the belief of the people who are implementing the solution or the belief of the people who the solution is intended for, the end user. The end user has to understand why, but why do I implement this? But why do I make a change? But why is this important? If that question is not getting answered, then no amount of design thinking process, Six Sigma process or lean process, or an absolute great identification of an outcome that we are seeking, or a beautiful design, which is a physical design by itself, is not going to work because the core answer that's not been given is the belief. And at many a times, the belief can be in contrary to the outcome that you expect or the change that you want to bring in people. It may be in conflict. So what do you do? If it is in conflict, are you going to give up on the process? Are you not going to follow it through? But that's not the case, right? Because innovation is born out of conflict. Innovation came about because there was a conflict is important because there was a conflict. Somebody had a different thought. Somebody challenged status quo. And that's where innovation happened. So it was born out of conflict. And when innovation was born, and every successful innovation was built on the fact that these beliefs were addressed. Right? Now, these beliefs are extremely important. And there's a statement by Albert Einstein, which I absolutely love. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we used when we created the problems. Today, when we are talking about, let's say, solving a problem, pain or creating a gain, obviously solving a pain because there's something which is painful and I need it fixed. Creating a gain would mean that whatever I'm doing right now is not necessarily giving me better results than what, and then there is an opportunity for me to get better results. Hence, I need a better product. But I cannot actually get that particular product or get that particular design or that process out if I continue to think the way we've always been thinking when we created it in the first place. Now, the biggest challenge that we have is that our deeply embedded thoughts and beliefs, and we have very, very deeply embedded thoughts and beliefs, which actually drive our adoption and rejections. And that is true for all end users, and we are all end users for something or the other. Now, it's that particular deeply embedded thought that needs to get addressed. And this is the most important aspect of how neuroscience of play comes into picture when we talk about design thinking. For any successful design thinking process, it's very, very important that we address those deep beliefs, thoughts, and it's a critical factor. And I'll tell you how it works. So typically, if you think about in our brain has got millions and millions of neurons, and these neurons are constantly connected with each other. And each of these connections are like superhighways. These connections are built on experiences that we have had, thoughts that we have, beliefs that we have built over a period of time, positive experiences, negative experiences, and these positive and negative experiences result actually in these highways getting formed, these highways getting strengthened, or these highways breaking. And these are highways that we very strongly believe in. And if through design thinking, I'm going to challenge those highways and I'm going to bring about a change in those highways, then those highways need to be addressed. And essentially, when we talk about design thinking, and then remember, we are talking about design thinking process as a process that's going to actually help me solve a problem or create a gain, but for which there is no simple solution. It's going to be a complex solution. So behind the complex solution is a lot of beliefs that will need to change. And the change in beliefs could be peripheral changes, or it could be conceptual changes. The entire concept of peripheral changes are, for example, if you look at the highway, there is an existing thought process on which you're augmenting a new thought process. You're just expanding the highway a little bit. That's a peripheral change. You're extending the highway a little bit. That's a peripheral change. You're creating a minute diversion. That's a peripheral change. Conceptual change is through design thinking when you want to bring about a completely different thought process altogether. Hey, this is not how we're going to do it at all. Crash it. There is something that we're going to do absolutely new, right? Now, that would mean that my existing highway is not the highway that I will use at all. I am now going to build a new highway. But the question is, why should I do that? This is working for me. This is fine. Nobody likes change. In fact, large population of the people, and in fact, the mass users will always resist change, whether it's a peripheral change or it is a conceptual change. It's a natural response, a human response to resist it. because change is uncomfortable. Any change will bring in a certain level of discomfort. Hence, that's a belief that needs to be addressed, right? And there are multiple roadblocks to any change, whether it's a peripheral change or a conceptual change. Now, if you talk about it, and if I were to take a poll, who wants change? All of you guys would say, yes, 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 definitely, we want change. The country needs to change. If I were to turn around and ask you who wants to change, I would probably not find as many takers. And that is true for all of us. Depending on the context of what we are talking, we may be early adopters, or most often than not, we are people who resist change as far as possible, right? So to address this peripheral and conceptual change, it's very, very important to understand what are those key roadblocks that needs to be addressed. Roadblock number one, understanding the phenomenon may be too difficult. So when I have used design thinking and I've come out with a particular solution, maybe the solution is a great solution, the product is a great product, the process is a great process, but understanding it for me may be a little difficult. And in some cases, sure, it's designed to be difficult. It may not necessarily be easy. Not everything has to be easy. Maybe it is difficult, but it is a real problem that I need to address, because my response to that change is that, hey, I don't understand it, hence I don't want to take it up, right? The second aspect, they may demonstrate little interest in the studied phenomenon. So for example, I may not be interested in, sure, you've come out with a great change, but it's not my area of interest. I'm not interested in it, but I am a big, I have a big role to play in that change. However, it's not my interest area, right? Third, end users may understand the new theory of phenomenon, but may not believe in it. Sure, we understand that, hey, it's a great phenomenon, it's a great idea, and it's something that's important to do, but I don't necessarily believe in it. But it's something that needs to be done. And if you think about every single aspect around us, and every single change that has happened, a change that has happened for the good, and we are actually talking about it positively today, you'll realize that it's gone through this process. When it was first introduced, you had a set of people who probably didn't understand what to do. There are a set of people who didn't think it was interesting. There are a set of people who understood it, but did not necessarily believe in it. Then are a set of people which becomes even more difficult, that they believe their initial idea to be valid and ignore some data to preserve that first opinion. So despite the fact that I've done my entire research, despite the fact that I'm actually giving a completely scientific solution, there are a set of people who will actually reject it, primarily because it's called the trap of initial ideas. I've had an initial idea, I've had an initial thought process, and I'd like to stick to that. And finally, the other roadblock, and which is a very, very important roadblock that needs to be dealt with, are members of the community, the larger ecosystem as a whole. The ecosystem as a whole may not necessarily be in sync with the change that is being proposed. Sure, I want to change. I'm very, very keen on adopting that change, but my ecosystem may not support it. And my ecosystem could be my family, ecosystem could be my friends, ecosystem could be the place that I work in, the place that I stay in, the community that I live in. So it's very, very important that I also address that part of it. So for any peripheral or conceptual change to come through, and that's the final outcome that we seek from design thinking, it is very important that we address these roadblocks. Now, if you think about, there are enough and more examples where these roadblocks have not been addressed and products, otherwise really, really cool products, have failed. Segway as an alternate mean of transport. Looked good, looked lots of fun, seemed interesting, it was good for the environment, but it's not been a success. You think about Google Wave, amazing idea that parallelly people could actually simultaneously work on a document, they could work together, but didn't really take off. Google Glass, the entire concept of real-time with the Google Glass, all the information that is available to me on a real-time basis, didn't really take off. Dormant, I don't know if any of you have ever used Dormant. Amazing service. A few years back, in fact, we shared the same office space a few years back. These are the guys who actually bought the entire laundry services home. Beautiful service. I mean, they were absolutely amazing at service. But fundamentally, the entire challenge there was that, they were doing it at a price that was not going to be sustainable. They were doing it at a price where they were challenging the existing laundry services around the corner and the dhobi. Now, when I remember having a conversation with them and saying that, hey, but how is this even feasible? Because I can obviously see that your cost to service is much greater. They're saying, no, we want to build this as a habit, and over a period of time, people will see the benefit of it and they'll be willing to pay more. You see, there's a design flaw. Why would I want to pay more? What is that differentiator that's coming onto the table that's telling me that I'm willing to pay more as against the dhobi who comes to my doorstep anyways, or the laundry service which is just around the corner? Why will I want to pay that 30%, 40% more? Some were generally bad designs by itself. I love this pencil one, so I put it up. If you think about a pencil which starts off by saying that too cool to do drugs and eventually ends with do drugs, it's just a bad design. It sucks, right? So there are enough and more examples of where the peripheral change that you were seeking, or the conceptual change that you were seeking in the way you thought, the way you approach things, the way you work, the way people actually address problems. If those beliefs are not addressed, the design will be flawed or the design will fail. And there is a way that those thoughts could be addressed. Right? And that is exactly where, sorry, this is the other one. I mean, this is another great example that I have. In fact, I don't know how many of you guys have tried Cocoa Berry. When Cocoa Berry first came in, it was expected to shake up the entire ice cream world. When they started, they were they started, I think, in 2008, 2009. That's been what, a good 12, 13 years. And they were expected to open some 500, 600 outlets in a period of 4 or 5 years. Today, they're sitting with 31 outlets. And you have somebody like a Naturals who's selling out of 135 outlets. The entire concept of Cocoa Berry was that, hey, we're bringing in yogurt, hence it's going to be healthier. Right? But that core belief system of the community, the core belief system of the end users was not addressed as to why should I shift from an ice cream to a yogurt dessert? Why is it important for me to do that? Right? And how will it make a difference to me? And there are various reasons as to why I could have made that shift. But those reasons were then not addressed. And hence, you can actually see the outcome. Right? Now, that is where neuroscience of play comes in. And this is where it becomes really, really interesting. And if you think about it, and if you think deeply about it, and if you start asking some of these questions, even when you're actually going through your process, your iterations of your entire design, you will realize how powerful they can be. Now you think about the entire concept that we spoke about. Now this is where, we talk about gamification, or we talk of neuroscience of play. What neuroscience of play essentially does is it takes that brain which is resistant. Now I've been asked to go through some peripheral change or some conceptual change. I'm tired of it. I'm disengaged towards that particular change because I'm not interested. I'm fatigued for a variety of reasons. I'm resistant to that change because I want to hold on to my original idea. And hence, my response to that change is always problem focused. I will come out with 10 different reasons as to why that design process or that change process that I'm talking about is not going to work. It's going to fail. I'll have 10 reasons for it. And that's where neuroscience of play comes. It takes that resistant, fatigued, and disengaged mind, and it takes it to a state of play. And what happens when it goes into a state of play is there are two parts of the brain that comes into play. One is the limbic brain, which is a small portion of the brain that sits at the back of your neck. And the second is the prefrontal cortex, which is this. Otherwise, we also call it the third eye, that spot. Right? The limbic brain is otherwise known as the threat response. Threat does not necessarily mean somebody pointing a gun at you. Threat can actually be, it's just that I am in a state of resistance. I do not like the interaction. I don't like the product. I don't like the process. I don't like the design. And hence, I'm going to be resistant towards it. I'm fatigued. So all of these give rise to the limbic brain response. So when the limbic brain opens like this, and it actually opens like this, when it opens like this, the prefrontal cortex shuts down. The prefrontal cortex is otherwise also known as the area. It's a small portion of the brain which is known for knowledge retention and absorption. That's where all your inherent knowledge sits. You're aware of all the things that needs to be done. You have a lot of knowledge that's already sitting in you. And that's also the place where all the absorption happens of new concepts, of new ideas. So when the limbic brain is active, the prefrontal cortex is closed. What neuroscience of play does is that it actually suppresses the limbic brain. And this is where I would like to recommend all of you, if you can, spend that time and read the book called Play. It's called The Play by Dr. Stuart Broad. He's also got a lovely talk that it's there on YouTube, but he really talks about the entire concept. He's the founder of Institute of Play in US, and he actually talks about how neuroscience of play actually makes a difference. If you think about it, and if you go back into your memory, you'll realize that most things that you actually remember, you really, really remember, the knowledge that you retain the most, things that you remember from the past have all come from happy moments. Have all come from moments when you were happy, when you were the most relaxed, when you were otherwise in a state of play. And when in that state of play, whatever knowledge is gone is the knowledge that has got retained, and that's actually stayed with you. And if you compare it to the wealth, the huge amount of, humongous amount of knowledge download that happens to our brains, the ones that we retain the most are the ones that got absorbed during the state of play. Right? What it does is it takes the brain to a state of play and hence suppresses the limbic brain. When it suppresses the limbic brain, it opens up the prefrontal cortex. It engages the prefrontal cortex, and that results in a complete shift that results in building engagement. It actually builds engagement towards that, towards the product, towards the solution, towards the proposed change. And it brings about a huge shift in behaviors. It brings about self-optimization, solution focus, collaboration, ownership, accountability. That is that one single reason why you see increased adoption, because there is direct engagement with the product. Right? And that is how neuroscience of play actually works. Now, this is easy. So conceptually, this is what neuroscience of play is all about. But how do you make it work? And that's where the entire Octalysis drivers come in. Students who are in the second year, third year, I think you've already studied certain amount. I think you've already studied something about Octalysis drivers or gamification principles. Students who are now coming in, you will obviously go through this in college. But let me explain this to you. This is really, really interesting stuff. And this entire concept of Octalysis drivers was created by, sorry, that's mighty rude of me. My apologies. Just give me a second. I'll just put my phone on silent. Right. So he created the concept of Octalysis drivers. And the reason he calls it human-focused design is because if you think about it, we as human beings are driven by two emotions largely. It's either pursuance of pleasure or avoidance of pain. Whatever we do in life, you think about every single thing that you do in life, it will always be either pursuance of pleasure or avoidance of pain. For instance, for all of you who are attending this particular session itself, most of you are here to learn. And with this learning, it's going to actually enhance your knowledge, make you feel happy about the knowledge that you're going to walk away from. That's pursuance of pleasure. Some of you are here because you've been told to be here. You would actually rather be doing something else. Now, you are here because you're also being marked. So that's avoidance of pain, right? So whatever we do in life will always be in either pursuance of pleasure or avoidance of pain. And they are essentially driven by 8 core drivers. Now, those 8 core drivers could be epic meaning. Epic meaning is when we do something in which we don't gain anything directly. There is no direct gain to us, but we feel good about it because we've been part of something much larger. You know, when you actually take part in a social activity, when you take part in some kind of a social service, you actually contribute to, let's say, an NGO. You're not really going to, and a lot of you, I don't know, in Bombay, if you've gone for the beach cleaning drives, you didn't get paid for it. In fact, it was quite a backbreaking, troublesome work that you did. But it made you feel good because you did something for the city. You were part of a movement that made a difference, right? And you did it with complete engagement. So that is epic meaning. When I do something which is not because I'm going to get some direct benefit out of it, but it will make me feel good. It is pursuance of pleasure primarily because I'm also making a difference to something much larger than myself. Then when we come to the right, we come to empowerment. This is not empowerment as in the conventional definition of empowerment. This is empowerment of creativity and feedback. Our brain is that much more engaged when it is empowered to be creative, and we ourselves are giving ourselves the feedback, which means that I can afford to make mistakes and I can continue to make mistakes in that particular activity without the fear of judgment, because nobody is watching me, nobody else is going to give me feedback. With whatever I do, I'm going to give myself feedback. So I am going to learn from my mistakes. I'm going to learn by, or the other entire concept of experiential learning. You try and learn. You try something, it works for you, great. You take it to the next level. You try something, it doesn't work for you, so you look at an alternative approach. But no one's else is coming and telling you that, hey, you're doing this wrong. But you yourself are discovering it, the entire discovery process. So when I'm free, when I have the empowerment to be creative and and I give feedback to myself, at that point of time, my engagement is also much higher, right? A lot of our learning designs today, when we look at, and especially experiential learning designs or digital learning solutions that we are creating, and especially in the school going children, is based on empowerment of creativity and feedback. Where you play the game, it works for you, great. You've learned something. It doesn't work for you, you still learn something. You made a mistake, so sure, there is a monster who's cropped up, or there is a little bubble that's burst, but you've learned something from that because there's a bubble burst. So you could have done something else and the bubble wouldn't have burst. So that's empowerment of creativity and feedback. Then we come to the next one, which is accomplishment. Accomplishment is something that we always desire. Like it's a level that we are trying to go to. I want to be in the top 5 in the class. I want to be in the top in the class. I want to be at a certain status in life. I want to reach that certain status in life. There is a certain bank balance that I'm targeting. There is a certain college institution that I want to go and study to, right? Some of you, when you were actually entering, getting out of your high school and thinking about higher education, had already made up your mind that, hey, I want to study in NIMS. And you knew for a fact that with a batch of 30, I have only limited options. For me, that's a benchmark. And I want to go and study there. And hence, I'm going to do whatever it takes for me to do that. So that's accomplishment when I'm trying to reach a particular level. Then we come to the next one, which is social influence. I mean, honestly, social influence, all of us know this. I mean, because my neighbor has it, because my partner has it, because my friends around me are doing something, I feel like doing that a little more. And if you think about it, I don't know if you guys are Harry Potter guys, but I mean, I'll tell you an absolutely amazing example of social influence as far as when it impacted me. I don't know if how many of you like to read, but if you like to read, there is an author by the name of Nassim Taleb. Amazing writer, writes really, really complex stuff, very, very interesting books. But he's a very, very difficult writer to read. I mean, it's really intense books. You have to really like his writing. He's very, very famous and he's extremely philosophical, but you need to be of that particular mindset. And when I was, and this is before the COVID, when I was flying very often, I would always see that professionals and senior leaders around me are all carrying books of Taleb and they're having a conversation. And the next thing I know that I have picked up a book of Taleb from the airport because everybody else is reading it and I needed to read. I wanted to read it as well. I never managed to finish the book, but that's how it's happened. I mean, if you extrapolate that and think about Harry Potter, everybody has read Harry Potter, whether you really enjoyed, fairy tales or not, or enjoyed magic or not, because everybody else had read it. Social influence. Everyone's played a particular game at least for some time because everybody around you was playing that particular game, right? So that's social influence. Then you have something called ownership. Now, ownership is important. Ownership here does not mean the conventional word of ownership where I own it. This is ownership of a level. So which means that if I have reached, let's say I have reached a particular level and from that point I decide that I'm fine. I am, let's say, in the gold category and going to the platinum category is too hard. I'm very happy with the gold category. I want to stay there. Super. But the world doesn't stay there. So I need to be completely engaged to ensure that I at least stay in the gold category. So I'll do whatever it takes to ensure that I stay in that gold category. So I will do whatever it takes to ensure that I stay in that benchmark. Maybe I'm not looking for accomplishment, but ownership of a level becomes extremely important, right? Then we come to the next one, which is unpredictability. Now, and guys, these are all core drivers which actually work as stimulators to the final outcome that we are seeking. If I want to bring about a change in somebody's behavior, these core drivers will come at play. Let's take unpredictability for example. I do not know what is going to come at the end of the process. but I am going to try and put my best foot forward because I'm anticipating a great return. For those of you, I think if I have parents who've joined into this session, you will recognize this. We come from the world of the Kali Pilis before the Ubers and the Olas existed. For those of us who come from the world of the Kali Pilis and only the Kali Pilis, you'll share my pain. You'll know that 9 out of 10 times when you actually took a Kali Pili, you said a small little prayer because 8 out of 10 times or 9 out of 10 times you had a bad experience. That person was either cheating you or trying to take you on a longer route, etc., etc. Suddenly, we've come into a world where we have the Ubers and the Olas, where we possibly have the same driver who's now driving an Ola and an Uber. He actually wishes me the time of the day when I get into the car. Sometimes, if there is a lady present, that guy makes the effort to come out and open the door. If there is baggage, the guy makes the effort to come out, open the boot, and help you with the baggage itself. And at the end is also wishing you the time of the day, saying thank you very much, and is also passing in that little word about the rating. He has no clue what rating I'm going to give, but that rating is going to make a difference to him. Hence, that unpredictability is today bringing about a change in behavior. Right? Then we come to the entire element of scarcity. This is one of my favorite ones. When you tell somebody that there are only some of these available, you want it that much more. When you tell somebody that you can't have it because there are only four available or only 5 available, then I want that much more. And this is where how the entire limited edition is sold. And if you think about the limited edition, and whether it's limited edition pens, limited edition cards, for those of you whose parents have owned something or the other of the limited edition, and especially if it is a car, go and have a conversation with them, they'll tell you. Essentially, it is the same engine under the hood. There's nothing different. It's exactly the same car. The only change that is there is that maybe the piping is different, the seat covers are different, the color is slightly different, but it's got that one limited edition written on it, which means that I'm a part of a very select set of people who own it. And that's called scarcity. And that scarcity ensures that I make that change in my behavior. Or I do whatever I do a little extra so that I get my hands on that limited edition. Right? And there are a lot of products which have got launched on that. There are a lot of, in fact, very, very beautifully used. And as I speak further, I'll talk about some of those examples. And the last one is avoidance. Avoidance is what we practice when we want to avoid pain. And my most favorite example in this, in terms of behavioral change, is if you think about it, you think about in a situation where you're driving on the road, it's the afternoon, and there are no other cars on the road. It's one of those afternoons where there is absolutely no traffic. You've come to a signal, the signal is red, and you're standing at the signal, but there are no vehicles. There is no vehicle coming in from the opposite side, from the left, from the right. There is no traffic cop. You're the only chap who's standing on the signal. Now, if you generally otherwise are an exceptionally law-abiding citizen, you will. But there are those moments of temptations that you'll have that there is nothing around and the signal is just red and I'm absolutely safe and I can actually go across. But I don't go across because there is that one little camera which is on the top of the signal, which is pointed at me. But there's no way for me to know that is that camera working. I have no clue. Possibly that camera is not working. But I want to avoid that pain of getting a challan because that camera has taken my photograph and hence I'm still standing at that signal till the time that signal turns green. Right? So that's where avoidance of pain comes in. Right? I'm just going to stop for a second because I think there's a question from Janvi. Yes, Janvi.
I'm sorry, sir, that happened by mistake. I'm very
sorry. Okay, no worries. All right. This ensured Janvi is still awake. So, right. So let's move on. So this is how the 8 core drivers actually break the entire human focused design. And these are the core octalysis drivers of gamification or neuroscience of play. Now you think about the same concept that we were talking about. We were talking about outcomes. We were talking about actions, which is the entire design thinking. And layered under the design thinking are your beliefs. Now, if you're going to address the beliefs by using a combination of these drivers in different ways, whether you're going to use points, badges, leaderboards, or the design by itself, a lot of times people come to me and say that, hey, we want to do gamification. Tell me, how do we put our points, badges, rewards, and leaderboards? Points, badges, rewards, and leaderboards are nothing but they are the game mechanics. They're the medium. The real gamification science is how you use the core drivers in your design. How do these core drivers actually factor into your design by itself? That subliminally, it's actually ensuring that the brain is going into a state of play. Subliminally, it's bringing about a change, whether it's a conceptual change or a peripheral change, right? And you think about some amazing examples. I mean, one of the biggest examples happens to be the entire Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Now tell me, before the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, did we not know that the country needs to be clean? It doesn't go to say that the country is absolutely spick and span today, but it definitely is far cleaner than what it used to be some time back. But the question arises that did we not know at that point of time that the country needs to be clean? So we did. We absolutely did. That the country needs to be clean. There is no denying it. Everybody knew that some of the practices that people follow is not the right practice. It's not something that you can do. And you were aware of it. So if you think about those roadblocks, it was a phenomenon everybody knew, but a lot of people didn't believe in it. It was a phenomenon that some communities did not agree with. It was a phenomenon that because you had to make certain changes in your behaviors. And behaviors had to be changed at a very deep-rooted level. Right? At a very, very deep-rooted endemic behaviors, beliefs had to be changed. Now, happened. And it happened largely because there was the epic meaning, because all of us started believing that little more by not throwing the rubbish outside or in a public place, by ensuring that I'm taking that little bit of extra effort to ensure that the rubbish that I have or the garbage that I have is going into the bin. I'm segregating the waste that I'm generating, or my waste generation by itself. When I was doing all of that, I felt good because I'm a part of a large movement. I felt I was contributing to the country. I felt I was contributing to the society. That's where epic meaning came in. Now you might be wondering, where did avoidance come in? Where did accomplishment come in? Now, while at a citizen level there was epic meaning, changes had to be made for example, at a government level, at a government bureaucracy level. The government bureaucracy had to believe in it for the actions to happen. Respective governments, politicians, people had to believe in it for the actions to happen. And that's where, if you think about how beautifully leaderboards were used, when leaderboards came out saying you have the 10 cleanest cities and the 10 dirtiest cities, you had the sense of accomplishment and avoidance coming in. When you had the cleanest states and the most dirtiest states that came in, you actually had both accomplishment as well as avoidance come into play. And I remember that one. I think there was an interview by Amitabh Bachchan and somebody else, and they were actually interviewing chief ministers who were ranking very, very high in clean cities. And they were also interviewing chief ministers who were ranking pretty low in clean cities. And you could see the difference. There was one side, there was pride, and the other side, there was defensiveness, there was embarrassment, but there was a very clear shift because they didn't want to be put in that same position again. So see how beautifully epic meaning has been used for the larger population, avoidance and accomplishment has been used for the state bureaucracy. How beautifully the dashboards have been used. If you look at the dashboard of Mysore, Chandigarh, India's cleaner cities. So we talk about the visual aspects of gamification. We talk about leaderboards, we talk about dashboards. Sure, dashboards, leaderboards are very, very important. But those dashboards and leaderboards have to be based on that core driver that you're focusing on. And the core driver here was avoidance. Core driver here was accomplishment. The core driver here was epic meaning. Because if I was I think I was in Indore, I think a couple of years back, because one of our colleagues was getting married and we had gone for her marriage. And Indore was actually the cleanest city. And we saw a lot of pride. And we were driving around the city, we drove around, and generally the most populated area is always around the station. and also lands up being the most dirty area. But we saw the pride in people because there were a lot of hoardings which said that we are the cleanest city. Indore is the #1 cleanest city. So we saw a lot of pride generally in people that they were making the effort to ensure that the trash is being thrown into the right boxes. Because they were all, when they did that, they felt a part of epic meaning. And that's where neuroscience of play came in. The entire thing became a humongous national game. Could I come #1? Could I be in the top 10? How do I avoid being in the bottom 10? Right? Then you think of, I'll give you another example. I love this one. If you think about the entire concept of empowerment of creativity and feedback, and this is how an entire industry changed. If you think about it, with the smartphones, and a lot of smartphones came in with a lot of cameras, but there were some of these companies which focused largely on the cameras, but they were not selling the camera. They were selling empowerment of creativity and feedback. They were saying that, hey, you can be a professional photographer yourself. And suddenly, all of us, and all of us in who liked photography or who didn't like photography, or for that matter, even we liked photography, we would always admire those guys carrying those heavy cameras and thinking that it's a big skill and it's a skill that I don't have, suddenly became a photographer. I became a photographer, my friends who became photographers, because the camera was letting me do that. The camera and the phone was letting me do that. It was allowing me to believe that I can click amazing photographs. And when I clicked those amazing photographs and I could choose which one is good, there was unpredictability. For example, and these are the iPhone ads. I used to love these iPhone ads when they're the hoardings that were normally put up. Because none of the hoardings were selling the phone. All the hoardings were selling that I can also be a professional photographer. And I could practice and I could give feedback to myself, and there was unpredictability because when I submitted my photographs, I don't know, maybe one of these photographs could possibly get picked up and put up on a hoarding. Beautiful example. Amazing example of how an industry changed. And because of this one thing, in a period of 5 years, the conventional camera industry, which is the Canon, the Nixons, etc., the Nikons, the Canon, etc., the overall market cap came down by 80%. The sales came down by 80% just with the advent of camera phones. And camera phones were there earlier as well. It's not that camera phones came in the last 5 years. It's the messaging around that which changed, and obviously the quality obviously changed of the phones, but the quality of the phones could have come in earlier as well. But it's just that when somebody said that, hey, here's an innovation, why don't I look at my ultimate outcome is engagement towards my phone and people buying the phone. But I'm not going to approach it by trying to sell a feature of the phone. I'm going to try and sell a belief. And the belief is you can be a great photographer as well. And the rest is history. Amazing. Young guys in this room, I'm sure you guys understand. Sorry, before I go to that example, let's look at the entire limited edition. I think the most amazing example, I spoke about Harry Potter, but if you think about the entire concept of scarcity, when MI first launched in India, they created this entire hype that we only have so many phones and we will launch at 12 o'clock in the afternoon on a particular day or 8 o'clock in the morning in that particular day. And everybody was sitting on their computer at 7:59, ensuring that I wanted to be in and I wanted that phone. Was it because that was the only smartphone available in the market? No. There were equally good smartphones available in the market. MI was coming in new. There was already Samsung, there was LG, enough and more phones. But I wanted that MI because they created that scarcity. What is it that they're only going to be open for so much time? There are only limited products. I want it. Great, I want it. So I'm there, I'm logged in, I want it. OnePlus did that later. OnePlus said we are launching, but we are launching with invitation only initially. So now everybody wanted to carry a OnePlus phone because OnePlus was initial release of OnePlus was by invitation only. Only if you were invited to buy a OnePlus could you actually get a OnePlus. So I wanted to be a part of that. Right? Beautiful example of how in the entire design, whether you're talking about a solution, whether you're talking about a marketing aspect, whether you're talking about a particular product, whether you're talking about a service, how these behavioral aspects have been brought into play, how the entire neuroscience of play has been brought into the overall design structure to actually drive an outcome. The next one, this is the latest example because I mean, there's a young kid who I know who's actually doing this. And I don't know how many of you guys are also Jordan fans, but a limited edition Jordan is worth its weight in gold. People stay up the night to ensure that they buy it. Some of them buy it so that they can sell it at almost 200%, 300% margin. Some of them buying because owning it is like something that you wear on your shoulder. It's like a badge that you own this limited edition Jordan. Right. And see, once again, it's a new product. It's a product that's also being positioned in such a way, but see how beautifully the core drivers are being used. And when they've actually looked at launching it, they didn't just look at the design, they looked at the entire solution from a holistic perspective. Right. So essentially, when we talk about gamification and neuroscience of play and design thinking, what is important here is that, and how can that be a composite approach? What is important here is to understand that neuroscience of play actually addresses the human in the process. When we talk about design thinking process, which is a process by itself, what neuroscience of play does is it actually addresses the human in the process. It addresses the core drivers in the process. And that's where if you, and then all of you as future designers and as thinkers, as ideators, you need to have this in your mind that, sure, I'm following a process. Am I following the process of empathizing, ideating, creating, prototyping, and implementing? All of that is great. But have I forgotten the human in the process? Not just from a need perspective. Sure, the human being has a need. We had a need for the country to be clean, but we never did it because the core drivers were not addressed. So in your design, are you addressing those core drivers? Are you addressing the belief? And that is the game. The entire neuroscience of play can actually work and can be one composite approach. If you're using the design process to arrive at that outcome, and the outcome is either solving a pain or creating a gain, but more importantly, you are bringing that to life by ensuring that you are addressing the belief, the core beliefs that sit under. And you're ensuring that you're addressing those beliefs by using the different core drivers, not just as a conventional gamification of points, badges, leaderboards. Those are good. They actually are pretty good when it comes to the entire visualization aspect of it. But is it there in your design process by itself? Is it ensuring that that change that you want to bring about, is that happening at a subliminal level? Right? And that's how the entire concept of neuroscience of play can actually come into the entire concept of design thinking and become one composite approach. I'm going to stop here and take questions. And in terms of slides, this is what I have. And I'm happy to take questions now.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your experience and thoughts with us. We definitely understand that to bring about a peripheral or conceptual change, interest, belief of the audience and the ecosystem might be a roadblock. Moreover, how Octalysis drivers can help bring a behavioral change for a solution. Well, with that, let's turn to the Q&A session. You can write your questions in the chat box.
Right. Is it okay if I stop sharing and we just bring it up to the screen to take it into a Q&A?
Yeah, sure.
If somebody wants a particular slide, I'll bring that back up. Right.
Well, till everyone types their questions, I have a thing to ask you.
Sure.
So, I'm a part of a team whose project is about sex education. So we identified the problem that early teenagers are very curious to know about this topic, but they don't get the right information and are kept away from that information. And in that process, they can get under wrong influence and such. So for this, we designed a game as a solution to bring about a behavioral change.
In
But
who?
in the early teenagers, for the teenagers, yes. But the belief of the society is so strong rooted in this of this problem. It's such a taboo. So to um, bring about a change for such a critical social issue, what might be the correct way?
Actually, the answer lies in your question. Think about it. You created a game for who? You created a game for a set of people who are anyway quite curious, right?
Right.
I mean, in all honesty, that's also the age when this curiosity comes in. So there is that natural age of curiosity, and also the fact that in the current generations that are coming in terms of whether you talk about social media, you talk about television, you talk about OTT, they are exposed to a lot of it already anyway. So there is a lot of curiosity that exists. There is a lot of information that they are anyway doing a lot of self-reading, and there's an awareness that exists, right? So who do you really want to influence in this particular case?
So
Or who do
here,
you really need to influence in this particular case?
okay, all right. That's a interesting point to go about.
Because your outcome is very important. You're right.
Hmm.
Because there is so much of information available and not all of them necessarily right, and in such different ways, it's very, very important for the teenagers to understand the right approach towards, have a healthy dialogue on it, and have a healthy approach towards sex. Now, important thing is they're still early teenagers, so they're very largely governed by the ecosystem. The ecosystem is essentially their parents. Ecosystem is their community. Ecosystem is people, elders that they live with. Right now, your resistance does not lie with these early teenagers. Your resistance actually lies with this particular set of people. It's this particular set of people who are uncomfortable because they still come from that age where having an open conversation about something like this was never really, I mean, it doesn't matter how advanced we are in the society, but it's not necessarily been, it's a very small segment of the society which was possibly open enough to discuss it. The larger population in the country is still not comfortable talking about it, right? So your game has ignored that one important section who actually are going to be the drivers. So what is essentially going to happen is, if your game is going to take your player, which is the early teenager, to the next level, that person still is going to struggle with questions for which the community is never going to support, or the ecosystem is never going to support. Now the ecosystem is uncomfortable about it. Can you think about bringing neuroscience of play into the design to make that process a little more comfortable for the ecosystem? Give it a thought, and suddenly you will see your solution taking a different shape.
Yes, that actually changes the perspective how I looked at the problem.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, sir.
you're welcome. Anyone else? Feel free. There are no right answers, right, wrong questions, or just feel free to ask anything. Something that you didn't understand, something that you'd like to talk about. If you have a disconnect with something and you want to debate it, all the more happy. If somebody debates with me, then I am happier because then I learn.
Can I ask another question I had in
Yeah, feel
mind?
free. You
So,
have me till 7:30, so you can feel free to ask as many.
all right. So, how do you realize that a gamified solution is the perfect solution for a specific problem?
No. So you don't do that ever. Never put the cart in front of the horse. That's my favorite statement. Some of your seniors
Okay.
who work with me will identify with this. Don't decide that the gamified solution is the right solution for the problem. It must emerge. And you must see whether there's application, you can apply gamification or not. In 9 times out of 10, you'll find an innovative way to apply gamification to actually ease the process, right? To build that engagement. But it must naturally evolve on the back of your overall design thinking approach. So the empathy centric research that you do, the ideation that you do, from there it should emerge to say that, hey, what are those key changes? What are those peripheral changes and the conceptual changes that we want to bring about in order to deliver to the outcome? Now, once I've identified that, and that is where you can think that, can I take a gamified approach to do this? Right.
Okay, all right. Let's end the event with a few words from our director, Professor Manisha Phadke.
Hey, hi, Rajib. It's nice to see you back again.
Hi, Manisha. How are you?
Good, good. I think.
Okay, guys. Before you go ahead, I want to tell the rest of the students something. This person is one person who I absolutely look up to. I think she's absolutely done wonders. Big fan. So this is a fan moment.
Point taken. Okay, let's get back. Well, I just wanted to thank you. I mean, if you could steal 2 hours to talk about, and I know this neuroscience of play is your passion, and translating it into this narrative, which was power packed, I think that's why there were no questions. There's a lot of processing that people want to do. And thank you so much. I hope we see you more often in school, and game mechanics and game design is one of the module that we take in the 3rd year. So I'm sure we will keep in touch, yes, through different routes. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. All the best, everyone.